On my daughter's wedding day, after I paid $25,000 for her perfect ceremony, she took the microphone in front of 150 guests and called me human trash. But what she didn't know is that I had proof she had been cheating on her husband with her personal trainer just 1 week before getting married. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Rebecca Smith. I'm 68 years old, and for decades I believed being a good mother meant enduring anything for love. How wrong I was. It all started many years ago, when my marriage to Mark Vega turned into a silent battlefield. Ever since Natalie was a little girl, just an 8-year-old running around our house in Chicago, Mark began his subtle work. Little poisonous comments whispered into our daughter's ear when I wasn't around. "Your mom doesn't have time for you. She's always working," Mark would tell her while brushing her blonde hair each morning before school. "If she really loved you, she'd be home more." I would get home from work at 7 in the evening, tired but always wanting to play with Natalie, to help her with her homework, to be the mother my own mother never was to me. But she would look at me with those blue eyes full of reproaches I couldn't understand. On weekends, when I suggested trips to the park or the zoo, Mark always had a perfect excuse. "Natalie already has plans with her friends, or she's too tired from school." Years later, I understood they were calculated lies to create distance between my daughter and me. The situation worsened when Mark and I divorced in 2015. Natalie was 20 then, already an adult, but her father's poison had been working for over a decade. During the divorce proceedings, Mark convinced Natalie that I was to blame for everything, that I had abandoned the family for another man. The truth was completely different. It was Mark who asked for the divorce after years of constant fights and manipulation. But I kept trying. I kept paying for everything Natalie needed, even after the divorce. Her apartment in downtown Chicago, $800 a month in rent. Her private health insurance, $150 every month. An allowance of $1,200 so she could study marketing without having to work. Her car, a white Ford Focus I gave her when she turned 21. The tuition for the private university she attended, almost $8,000 a year for 4 years. Despite all this, every time I tried to get close to her, Natalie treated me coldly. Her visits were mechanical, forced. She would come to my house on Sundays, sit on the living room sofa for exactly 1 hour, answer my questions with one-word answers, and leave saying she had things to do. She never told me about her life, her dreams, her problems. It was like there was an invisible wall between us, built brick by her father's lies. In 2017, when Natalie was 22, she met Andrew Moore at a young entrepreneurs conference in Milwaukee. He was 29 at the time and had just inherited his late father's fuel company, 3 gas stations in the Midwest, and contracts with major trucking companies. A solid business that brought in over $2 million a year. I remember the first time Natalie told me about him. It was a Sunday in March, one of those spring days in Chicago where the sun is warm, but the breeze is still cool. We were on my terrace, having coffee after a tense lunch, as usual. "Mom, I met someone," she said suddenly. And for the first time in years, I saw a spark of real emotion in her eyes. "Oh, really? Tell me about him," I replied, trying to hide my joy that she was finally sharing something personal with me. "His name is Andrew. He has a gas station company. He's very hardworking and ambitious," she said, and something in the way she mentioned the company before any personal quality made me feel a pang of unease. But I wanted to believe my daughter had found love. I wanted to believe that maybe, through this relationship, we could rebuild our lost connection. When Andrew came to my house for dinner for the first time 2 months later, I liked him immediately. He was polite, respectful, intelligent. He spoke about his plans to expand the family business with genuine passion. He treated Natalie with apparent affection. During their next 6 years of dating, I was the unofficial financial backer of the relationship. The years passed, and my relationship with Natalie remained in that uncomfortable distance that Mark had so carefully cultivated. But in 2022, something started to change in my daughter's behavior. Subtle changes at first, then increasingly obvious to someone who had watched her for nearly 3 decades. It was during one of our monthly dinners at my house, a Tuesday in February 2022, when I noticed the first sign. Natalie arrived with a new black Prada bag with gold hardware, which must have cost at least $1,500. When I asked her about it, she told me it was a small investment to feel good about herself. An investment? I asked, as I served the lasagna I had made especially for her. Honey, a handbag isn't an investment. Mom, you don't understand these things. It's important to project a good image, especially now that Andrew is expanding the company, she replied with a tone that struck me as odd, as if she were repeating rehearsed words. That sentence stuck with me, especially now that Andrew is expanding the company. She hadn't mentioned love, the happiness of being with him, or anything personal. Everything revolved around the company. The following weeks, I started paying more attention. During our weekly phone calls, Natalie always steered the conversation toward Andrew's business achievements. He just signed a new contract with a trucking company from Indianapolis. He's thinking about opening a 4th gas station in Wisconsin. The business is growing by 20% this year. In April 2022, during a family barbecue at my sister Helen's house, I overheard a conversation that sent a chill down my spine. Natalie was talking to her cousin Rachel in the garden, thinking no one was listening. I had gone out to the patio to smoke my after-dinner cigar when I heard their voices from the other side of the hedge. But do you really love him? Rachel, who had always been blunt as a bullet, asked. Rachel, love is a very romantic concept, Natalie replied with a laugh that sounded calculated to me. Andrew offers me stability, financial security. Isn't that what every woman wants? Besides, when we get married, I'll be a part of all of this. The company has been in both our names since last year. My hand trembled and the cigar fell onto the tiles. The company was in both their names? Andrew had made Natalie a co-owner of $1 million business without even being married. That wasn't love. It was pure manipulation. But what shocked me most was the cold, calculating tone with which my daughter spoke of the man who was supposed to be her husband. There was no warmth, no genuine emotion. She spoke of him like someone discussing a business opportunity. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering signs I had ignored. Natalie's excessive spending had increased considerably in the last 2 years. Designer clothes, expensive beauty treatments, costly vacations that Andrew supposedly paid for, but which I suspected were actually coming from the funds of the company they now shared. I also remembered something more disturbing. In December 2021, Natalie had started talking obsessively about financial security. Mom, it's important to have a safety net, she would tell me. You never know when things can change. At the time, I thought she had matured, that she had developed financial responsibility. Now I realized she was preparing her future at Andrew's expense. But it was her new routines that really set off all my alarms. In May 2022, Natalie started mentioning that she had a lot of extra work at the marketing agency where she worked. Mom, I've been getting home really late lately, but we have several important projects. At first, I was proud of her work ethic. However, something didn't add up. One afternoon in June, I decided to stop by her office to invite her to dinner. It was a Thursday, 7:30 in the evening, one of those times she was supposedly working overtime. The receptionist informed me that Natalie had left at 5 o'clock, as usual. That lie hit me like a punch. If she wasn't working late, where the hell was she during those hours? Who was she spending that time with that she was stealing from Andrew and their relationship? It was then, in July 2022, that I made a decision that would change everything forever. I needed to know the truth. I needed to protect that young man who, despite everything, had treated me with respect and affection for years. Andrew didn't deserve to be deceived, and if my own daughter was up to something shady, I had a moral obligation to find out. I contacted Thomas Nash, a private investigator my lawyer had recommended years ago during the divorce. Thomas was 45 years old. He was discreet, professional, and had worked on cases of corporate and personal infidelity for over 20 years. Rebecca, I understand your concern, he told me during our first meeting in his downtown Chicago office. As a mother, you need to know if your daughter is being honest, both with her partner and with you, who are supporting her financially. I explained my suspicions. The non-existent overtime, the excessive spending, the obsessive interest in Andrew's company, the conversation I had overheard. Thomas nodded with a serious expression. I will investigate her movements over the next few weeks. If there's something to uncover, I'll find it, he assured me. His fee was $60 a day plus expenses, but I was willing to pay any amount for the peace of mind of knowing the truth. If I was wrong, I would be overjoyed. If I was right, at least I could make informed decisions on how to proceed. What Thomas discovered in the following weeks would shatter the image I had of my daughter forever and prepare me for the greatest humiliation of my life. The first weeks of August 2022 were an emotional roller coaster. Every day I waited for Thomas's call with new findings, while trying to maintain my normal routine and continue being the mother who generously financed Natalie's life, even though every dollar I gave her felt like a stone in my stomach. The first report arrived on a Friday morning. Thomas had been following Natalie for 10 days, meticulously documenting her movements. The results were devastating. "Rebecca, you should sit down before you read this," he had told me over the phone from his office. "Your daughter isn't working overtime. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when she's supposedly working until 9 at night, she leaves her office at 5 o'clock sharp and goes directly to the Palmeiras residential complex, Building C, 4th floor." My heart stopped. I knew that complex. It was where Marcus Jones lived, the personal trainer Natalie had hired a year ago to get in shape for the wedding. A guy in his 30s, dark-haired, muscular, with that easy smile that makes women lose their minds. "How long does she stay there?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. "Between 2 and 3 hours each time. She always leaves after 8, her hair messy, her clothes wrinkled. Rebecca, I'm sorry, but there's no doubt about what's happening in there." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a whole hour, motionless, processing the betrayal. Not only was she lying to me, but she was cheating on Andrew in the most vile way possible. A man who loved her, who had put his company in her name, who was planning to build a life with her. But Thomas wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, his discoveries became even more disturbing. He had intercepted phone conversations between Natalie and Mark, where they openly discussed the strategy for the future. In a recording from the 15th of August 2022, I could hear my ex-husband's voice advising our daughter, "You have to secure your position before the marriage, Natalie. Make sure your name is on everything, the house, the bank accounts, the business contracts. Men can be very fickle after the wedding." And Natalie's response sent a chill down my spine. "Don't worry, Dad, I already have 50% of the company. After the wedding, I'm going to convince him to transfer the house to me too. Andrew is so naive he'd do anything for me." "And what about that trainer of yours?" Mark asked with a conspiratorial tone that turned my stomach. "Marcus is just for fun, Dad. A release valve. Andrew is too formal, too serious. A man needs to know his wife has experience," Natalie replied, laughing. That laugh, that cruel, calculating laugh, I didn't recognize it as my little girl's. What had my daughter become? Thomas continued to gather evidence through September and October. Photographs of Natalie entering and leaving Marcus's apartment, recordings of conversations where she planned schedules for their meetings, expense records showing she used money from Andrew's company to buy expensive gifts for her lover, a $300 watch, dinners at exclusive restaurants, even a weekend at a luxury hotel in Indianapolis that she had justified as a work retreat. The bitterest irony was that I was still funding this double life. The $1,200 a month I sent her, her apartment rent, her health insurance, all of it contributed to maintaining the lifestyle that allowed her to cheat on Andrew so comfortably. In November 2022, Natalie officially announced her engagement. Andrew had organized a romantic dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in Chicago and had proposed with an engagement ring that must have cost at least $10,000. A 2-carat solitaire that sparkled on her finger like a cruel joke. "Mom, I'm so happy," she told me on the phone that night, with an emotion I now knew was completely fake. "Andrew is the perfect man for me. We're getting married next September. Does September work for you?" "Of course, sweetie," I replied, swallowing my bile. "Have you thought about a budget for the wedding?" "Well, Andrew says we can spend up to $30,000, but I was thinking, Mom, you've always been so generous with me. Could you help us with some of the extra expenses? It would mean so much to me to have my dream wedding." Of course she was asking me for money. Not only was she betraying me, not only was she cheating on the man who loved her, but she also wanted me to finance the sham. "How much do you need?" I asked, already knowing I would say yes, because despite everything, she was still my daughter, and a masochistic part of me wanted to see just how far she was willing to go. "Well, with the church, the reception, the flowers, the music, the honeymoon, we were thinking about an additional $15,000. I know it's a lot, but..." "Don't worry, Natalie. Mom will take care of everything," I said, and I could hear her sigh of relief on the other end of the line. That night, after hanging up, I poured myself a double scotch and called Thomas. "I want you to step up the surveillance," I told him. "I need irrefutable proof of everything she's doing. Photographs, recordings, exact dates, times, everything you can legally get." "Why do you need so much material?" he asked. "Because I'm going to finance this wedding, Thomas. I'm going to pay every dollar she asks for. And when the time is right, when she's gone too far to turn back, I'm going to show the whole world who Natalie Smith really is." Over the next few months, from December 2022 to August 2023, I continued to play my role as the generous, proud mother. I paid for Street, Savior's Church, the reception at the Grand Astoria Hotel, the most expensive photographer in the state, the imported flowers, the 12-piece orchestra, even the 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives, which cost $8,000. Meanwhile, Thomas documented every encounter with Marcus. The last rendezvous was exactly 1 week before the wedding, on the 2nd of September 2023. 3 hours in the trainer's apartment, leaving with her hair messy and her clothes wrinkled, as always. That night, 1 week before her wedding, my daughter had betrayed the man she was going to marry for the last time, and I had the proof of everything. The day finally arrived, the 9th of September 2023. A sunny Saturday, perfect for a wedding, perfect for a sham, perfect for revenge. The 9th of September 2023 dawned with that perfect blue sky that only a Midwestern autumn can offer. As I put on my dark gray suit, the one I had bought especially for this occasion, I couldn't help but smile ironically. I had invested over $25,000 in this farce, and every penny would be worth it when everything came to light. The religious ceremony at Street, Savior's Church, was scheduled for 5 in the afternoon. I arrived an hour early to oversee the final details and make sure everything was perfect for the big show. White flowers imported from Holland decorated every pew. The photographer, Daniel Reed, was strategically positioning his equipment, and the 150 guests began to arrive dressed in their finest. Natalie arrived in a white limousine that I had rented for $500 for the day. She was radiant in her Italian silk wedding dress, which cost $4,000, with a lace veil that had belonged to my grandmother. Seeing her so beautiful caused me a pang of genuine pain. For a second, my mother's heart forgot everything I knew about her, and only saw my little girl, turned into a stunning woman. "Mom, thank you for making this possible," she told me as we walked down the central aisle of the church, her arm linked with mine. "You don't know what it means to me to have you here, walking with me to the altar." Her words sounded sincere, but I knew the truth behind that perfect mask. Every step we took towards Andrew, who was waiting for us at the altar with a nervous and excited smile, was another step towards the consummation of her deceit. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Andrew said his vows with tears in his eyes, promising to love and protect Natalie for the rest of his life. She responded with beautiful words about eternal love and fidelity, words that made me sick to my stomach, knowing what she had been doing with Marcus just a week before. When the priest declared them husband and wife, applause echoed through the historic church. The camera flashes captured the moment of the kiss, and I clapped like everyone else, maintaining my role as the proud mother until the end. But it was during the transfer to the Grand Astoria Hotel that the first signs of what was to come appeared. The luxury bus I had hired to transport the guests was delayed by half an hour due to a mechanical problem. Natalie, who until that moment had maintained her composure, began to show her true temper. "This is unacceptable," she yelled at the event coordinator, an older man who had organized hundreds of weddings without a problem. "My wedding has to be perfect. There can't be any mistakes." Andrew tried to calm her down. "Love, it's only 30 minutes. The guests will understand." "You don't get it," she snapped, her voice cutting like broken glass. "This is my wedding, the wedding of my dreams. Everything has to be perfect." At the hotel, the problems continued. The air conditioning in the main ballroom wasn't working properly. With 150 elegantly dressed people in an enclosed space during the hot Chicago September, the temperature quickly became unbearable. Guests began to fan themselves with the menus. Women took off their jackets, and makeup started to run from the sweat. "Fix that immediately," Natalie ordered the hotel manager with that authoritarian voice I didn't recognize as my daughter's. "We paid a fortune for this place." The manager, visibly nervous, explained that they had technicians working on the problem, but that it could take an hour to fix it completely. Natalie was furious, but the real disaster came when dinner was served. I had ordered beef tenderloin as the main course for all the guests, clearly specifying that I wanted top-quality cuts. However, due to a mistake in the kitchen, they had only prepared 80 portions instead of the required 150. "How is it possible that there isn't enough food?" Natalie exclaimed when the chef discreetly approached to explain the problem. "There are guests who are going to go without dinner at my wedding." The chef, a professional with decades of experience, suggested quick solutions. Quickly prepare an alternative chicken dish for the remaining guests, or serve smaller portions of beef so it would be enough for everyone. But Natalie was beside herself. "No, I want exactly what I ordered, 150 top-quality beef tenderloins. I don't care how long it takes." Andrew, clearly uncomfortable with the spectacle his new wife was making, tried to mediate. "Honey, maybe we could accept the chicken solution. The guests will understand, and we can continue with the celebration." Natalie looked at him with a fury that made me shudder. At that moment, I could see the real person hiding behind the mask of the perfect bride. Her eyes shone with a disproportionate rage, her face had turned red, and her hands trembled with anger. "You're failing me too!" she yelled at Andrew in front of several guests who witnessed the scene. "This is supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to support me." Poor Andrew fell silent, clearly humiliated by his wife's public outburst. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, and I could see some of them start to whisper among themselves about the bride's strange behavior. Meanwhile, I watched everything from my table, slowly sipping my glass of wine and waiting. Every explosion of Natalie's anger, every moment of tension, was like a symphony to my ears. She was showing her true character in front of everyone, preparing the ground for what I knew was coming next. Finally, at 11 at night, after they had solved the food problem by serving a mix of beef and chicken, and after they had partially fixed the air conditioning, the dancing began. The 12-piece orchestra I had hired started to play, and the dim lights created a more relaxed atmosphere in the ballroom. The guests, relieved to finally be able to enjoy the party after hours of tension, headed to the dance floor. Natalie and Andrew opened the dance with a waltz they had rehearsed for months, and for a few minutes, everything seemed to go back to normal. But I knew the worst was yet to come. I could see it in Natalie's eyes, in the way she looked at me from time to time, with that mix of resentment and contempt that she had been cultivating for years. All the accumulated tension during the day, all the problems with the organization, had only been the prelude to what was coming. When the DJ took the microphone and announced that the bride wanted to address the guests to thank them for their presence, my heart sped up. This was the moment I had been preparing for months. Natalie walked up to the small stage with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, took the microphone with hands trembling from adrenaline and accumulated anger, and looked directly at where I was sitting. It was the moment of truth. Natalie walked onto the stage with determined steps, her wedding dress billowing behind her like the sails of a ship in a storm. The microphone picked up the sound of her agitated breathing as she positioned herself in front of the 150 guests who had stopped dancing to listen to her words of thanks. "Good evening, everyone," she began, with a voice that tried to sound sweet, but which I detected was laden with tension. "I want to thank you for joining us on this very special day for Andrew and me." The guests applauded politely. Andrew, standing at the foot of the stage, looked at her with genuine adoration, suspecting nothing of what was about to happen. My sister Helen, sitting at the family table, smiled proudly at her niece. Natalie's friends from university raised their glasses in a silent toast. "It's been a wonderful day, although with some setbacks," Natalie continued, and I could feel her voice gradually hardening. "But that's life, isn't it? There are always people who let you down when you need them most." An uncomfortable murmur rippled through the room. Guests exchanged confused glances. These were not the typical words of gratitude they expected to hear at a wedding. Natalie paused dramatically, her eyes scanning the room until they met mine. In that moment, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. A cruel, cold smile that completely transformed her beautiful face into something unrecognizable. "There are people you think will always be there for you, who you believe love you unconditionally," she went on, never taking her eyes off me. "But then you discover that it was all a lie, a facade to hide how selfish and petty they really are." The silence in the room had become deafening. The waiters stopped pouring drinks. The musicians exchanged nervous glances. Andrew frowned, clearly confused by the turn his wife's words were taking. "Mom," Natalie said suddenly, pointing directly at me with her finger while holding the microphone with her other hand. I want everyone to know who you really are." My heart started beating so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. But I kept my composure, my face impassive, my hands placed firmly on the table. I had been waiting for this moment for months. "Everyone here thinks you're a generous mother, a respectable woman," she continued, her voice rising in volume. "But I know the truth. You abandoned our family when I was 8 years old. You left us with no money, no support, nothing." The murmurs intensified. Some guests looked at me with surprise and disapproval. My sister Helen stood up, clearly ready to defend my honor, but I gave her a discreet signal to stay quiet. "My father and I had to get by on our own while you were out having fun with other men," Natalie yelled, her voice breaking with an emotion that seemed genuine, but which I knew was pure theater. "Years of waiting for you to come back, years of waiting for you to be the mother you promised to be." Andrew went on stage and tried to gently take the microphone from her. "Love, I think it's better if—" "Don't touch me!" Natalie screamed, pushing him away abruptly. "This is something I need to say, something I've been holding in for too long." She turned back to me, her eyes shining with tears, which I couldn't tell if they were real or fake. "And now you show up here, at my wedding, pretending to be the perfect mother, paying for everything to clear your conscience, but money doesn't erase what you did to us." The room was in total shock. Some guests had started to get up from their seats, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Natalie's friends looked at her with a mixture of horror and fascination. Andrew's colleagues seemed not to know where to look. "You are human trash," Natalie finally exclaimed, pronouncing each word with a cruel precision that cut through the air like bullets. "Human trash, that's what you are. A woman who abandons her family and then tries to buy her forgiveness with dirty money." The silence that followed her words was deafening. 150 people held their breath, waiting for my reaction. Andrew had gone completely pale, looking back and forth between his wife and me, as if he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. But I said nothing. I remained seated in my chair, my hands calmly placed on the table, and I smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but one that contained years of accumulated knowledge about my daughter's true nature. Slowly, I stood up. My chair slid back with a soft sound on the marble floor. All eyes were on me, expecting me to shout, to defend myself, to make a scene as dramatic as Natalie's. Instead, I calmly walked over to my sister Helen. I leaned in to give her a kiss on the cheek and whispered in her ear, "Take care of yourself. This is just the beginning." Then I walked with measured steps towards the back doors of the ballroom, the same ones the waiters had used all night. My smile widened with each step. I could feel the stares on my back, hear the murmurs that were starting to rise, but I didn't look back once. When I reached the doors, I paused for a moment and turned my head slightly. I could see Natalie on the stage, still holding the microphone, her face a mask of triumph and satisfaction. Andrew had come down from the stage and was talking urgently with some of his friends, clearly embarrassed by the spectacle his new wife had just created. "Perfect," I muttered to myself, and I left the ballroom. As I walked through the hotel corridors towards the main exit, I took out my cell phone. I had 3 missed calls from Thomas and several text messages. "How did it go? Is the plan ready?" the last message read. I replied with a single word: "Begin." That night, when I got back to my apartment, I poured myself a 30-year-old single malt scotch that I had been saving for a special occasion. I sat on my terrace, looking at the lights of Chicago spread out before me like a glittering tapestry, and made a silent toast. "To justice," I said aloud, raising my glass to the stars and to the consequences of our actions. The next day, the second phase of my plan would begin. Natalie had crossed the point of no return, and now she would have to face the consequences of years of lies, manipulation, and cruelty. She had completely underestimated her old mother, thinking she could humiliate me publicly without repercussions. But as she was about to find out very soon, Rebecca Smith was not a woman who let herself be trampled without fighting back, and the response I had been preparing for months would be devastating. I slept better that night than I had in years, knowing that the time had finally come for the truth to come to light. On Monday, the 12th of September, 2023, 3 days after the public humiliation I had suffered at the wedding, I woke up at 6 in the morning with a mental clarity I hadn't experienced in years. There was no trace of pain or sadness in my heart, only a cold, calculated determination that filled me with energy. During breakfast, I mentally reviewed each step of the plan I had been perfecting for months. Thomas had given me a complete dossier with all the necessary evidence. Dated photographs of Natalie's visits to Marcus's apartment, recordings of compromising conversations with Mark, bank records showing how she had used money from Andrew's company to finance her extramarital affairs. My first action was to call First National Bank, where I had the automatic monthly payment for Natalie's apartment rent set up. I spoke directly with my personal manager, Linda Davis, who had known me for over 20 years. "Good morning, Linda. I need to immediately cancel the automatic rent payment for the apartment at 47 Regina Street. Account number S76018256789012 to 3,456, I said with a calm but firm voice. "Of course, Mrs. Smith. Is there a problem with the property?" Linda asked in her usual professional tone. "Let's just say there's been a change in family circumstances." "The automatic payment must stop immediately," I replied. "I also need to cancel the automatic payment for the HealthGuard insurance and the monthly transfer of $1,200 to my daughter's account." Linda was silent for a few seconds, processing the implications of my requests. "Mrs. Smith, I understand these are sensitive matters. Are you sure you want to proceed with all these cancellations?" "Completely sure, Linda, and I need everything to be effective by the end of today." "Very well, ma'am. I will send you the confirmation documents by certified mail before 6 this evening." My second call was to Prestige Travel, where I had booked and fully paid for Natalie and Andrew's honeymoon in the Maldives. The trip was scheduled to begin on Thursday, September 14, just 2 days later. "Good morning. My name is Rebecca Smith, and I need to immediately cancel reservation number ML78492023 for 2 people at the Conrad Maldives Rangali Island Resort," I explained to the customer service agent. "Let me check your reservation, Mrs. Smith. I see the trip begins the day after tomorrow." Unfortunately, cancellations with less than 72 hours' notice carry a penalty of 80% of the total value. "I don't care about the penalties," I replied firmly. "I want a full and immediate cancellation, and I want the guests to be officially notified that the reservation has been canceled by the original payer." "I understand, ma'am. The cancellation will be processed immediately, and a notification will be sent to the guest's registered email address." The third call was the most satisfying of all. I contacted HealthGuard, the private medical insurance company where I had a family policy that had covered Natalie for over 10 years. "Good morning. I'm Rebecca Smith, policy number SA4556789-2013. I need to immediately remove my daughter Natalie Smith Vega from the family coverage," I informed the representative. "Can you tell me the reason for the removal, Mrs. Smith?" the employee asked. "The beneficiary no longer meets the family requirements to maintain coverage," I replied with cold, legal precision. "The removal must be effective immediately." "Understood, ma'am. The removal will be processed today, and the new policy without the beneficiary will be active starting tomorrow." While making these calls, I received several text messages and missed calls. Some were from my sister Helen, worried about what had happened at the wedding. Others were from family and friends who had witnessed the spectacle and wanted to hear my side of the story. But the message that interested me most was from Thomas. "Rebecca, Andrew is trying to contact you. It seems he wants to talk to you personally." I decided to ignore all communications for the time being. My plan required the first consequences of my actions to be felt before any conversation or explanation. At 2 in the afternoon, while I was having a quiet lunch at my favorite restaurant in the historic district, I received the first desperate call from Natalie. "Mom, what have you done?" she screamed into the phone with a hysterical voice that was music to my ears. "The bank called me saying they canceled the rent payment, and the travel agency says our honeymoon is canceled." "Good morning, Natalie," I replied with deliberate calm as I cut my steak. "How's your first day of married life?" "Don't be sarcastic with me. Explain what's happening," she continued screaming, her voice breaking with desperation. "You see, honey, after your beautiful speech on Saturday night, I've had some time to reflect on our mother-daughter relationship," I said slowly, savoring each word. "And I've come to the conclusion that you were right. I am human trash, and human trash shouldn't be financing the lives of such successful and self-sufficient people like you." "But, Mom, I didn't mean—" she began to stammer, her tone changing drastically from anger to pleading. "Oh, but I think you did mean it," I interrupted her. "In fact, You said it in front of 150 witnesses. It was very clear and very public. And you know what, Natalie? You've freed me. You've freed me from the obligation to continue financing the life of someone who considers me human trash. Please, Mom. It was the stress of the wedding. I was nervous. I wasn't thinking clearly, she pleaded now. All her previous arrogance evaporated. Stress is a funny thing, I mused aloud. It makes people show their true character. And you showed yours, very clearly, on Saturday night. But the honeymoon? Andrew is devastated. He says his friends are laughing at us, she cried desperately. Ah, yes, Andrew, I said with feigned concern. Poor boy. It must be very uncomfortable for him that his brand new wife put on such a spectacle at her own wedding. I should really talk to him to apologize for raising such an expressive daughter. Don't you dare talk to Andrew, Natalie exclaimed, and I could detect genuine panic in her voice. Why not, honey? Is there something you don't want him to know about you? I asked with studied innocence. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. I could hear her ragged breathing. I could imagine her mind working frantically, trying to calculate what I knew and what I didn't. Mom, please, she finally said with a small, broken voice. We can fix this. We can talk like adults. I apologize for what I said. It was out of line. Oh, Natalie, I sighed dramatically. Apologies are lovely, but actions have consequences, and you, my dear daughter, are going to learn that lesson in the most direct way possible. What do you mean by that? She asked, in a barely audible voice. I mean that your comfortable, mom-funded life has officially ended. From now on, you and your husband will have to manage on your own, like the independent, successful couple you clearly are. But, Mom, you can't do this. I'm your daughter, she cried desperately. Yes, you are my daughter, I agreed. But you're also a 8-year-old married woman who just publicly proved that you don't respect or value me. So now it's time for you to prove that you can stand on your own 2 feet. I hung up the phone and turned it off immediately. I knew she would try to call me obsessively for the next few hours, but I needed her to feel complete desperation before proceeding with the next phase of the plan. That afternoon, I completed all the banking and legal paperwork. By 6 p.m., Natalie had officially lost her subsidized apartment, her health insurance, her monthly allowance, and her dream honeymoon. But this was only the beginning. The real bomb was about to explode, and when it did, it would destroy not only her marriage, but the entire life of lies she had built. Tuesday, September 13, dawned gray and rainy, as if the Chicago weather wanted to match the mood I knew would soon invade my daughter's life. As I had my coffee and toast for breakfast, I watched the raindrops slide down my kitchen window, each one taking with it another piece of the facade Natalie had built over the years. At 9 a.m., sharp, I dialed Thomas's number from my landline. His voice sounded alert and expectant when he answered on the second ring. Rebecca, I've been waiting for your call. How do we proceed with phase 2? He asked without preamble. It's time to contact Andrew, I replied with the same determination I had felt the day before. But I need you to do it anonymously, just as we planned. Use the prepaid phone you bought last month. Understood. Should I send him the photographs by email first, or do you prefer I speak with him directly? The call first, I decided after a few seconds of reflection. I need him to be emotionally prepared for what he's about to see. If we send him the proof without warning, he might react impulsively and ruin the whole process. Thomas had experience handling delicate situations as a private investigator. He knew exactly how to dose the information to maximize the impact without causing unnecessary collateral damage. We had gone over the conversation script several times in the preceding weeks. What time should I call him? Late enough for him to be at his office, but early enough for him to have the whole day to process the information, I calculated mentally. And remember, you have to sound like someone who genuinely cares about his well-being, not like a blackmailer or someone seeking revenge. Of course. I'll introduce myself as someone who has important information about his wife and who prefers to remain anonymous for personal safety reasons. I hung up and went to my study, where I had organized all the evidence Thomas had collected over the months. Photographs dated with precision of Natalie entering and leaving Marcus's building at times that coincided exactly with her supposed overtime hours, records of phone calls between her and the personal trainer, receipts from expensive restaurants paid with Andrew's company credit card during romantic dinners that were not with her fiancé. The most devastating piece of the puzzle was an audio recording that Thomas had obtained through a contact at the gym where Marcus worked. In that recording, dated the 5th of September, 2023, just 4 days before the wedding, Natalie's voice could be heard clearly speaking on the phone, with a friend. "No, of course I don't love Andrew in that intense, romantic way," her voice said with a coldness that had chilled me the first time I heard it. "But he's stable, he has money, and he's made me a co-owner of the company. After we get married, I'll have full access to all the accounts. It's a long-term investment, you understand? And then, the part that I knew would completely destroy Andrew. Marcus is something else entirely. With him, I feel real passion, authentic chemistry. He's what I need to keep from going crazy in such a practical marriage." At 11 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Thomas, confirming that he had just finished the conversation with Andrew. "How did he react?" I asked immediately. "Exactly as we expected," Thomas replied, his tone a mix of professional satisfaction and genuine compassion. First shock, then denial, then anger, and finally a kind of desperate resignation. "He's asked me to send all the proof to his personal email. Did he mention anything about confronting Natalie immediately?" I advised him not to, until he has reviewed all the evidence. I told him he needs to be completely sure of the facts before making any irreversible decisions. He has agreed to wait until tomorrow. "Perfect," I murmured, feeling the pieces of the puzzle fall into place exactly as I had planned. "Send him all the material this afternoon. Photographs, recordings, financial records, dates, times, everything." That afternoon, as Thomas prepared the package of evidence that would destroy my daughter's marriage, I received several more calls from Natalie. Her tone had evolved from the hysteria of the previous day to something more like calculated desperation. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," she began on her 4th call of the day, trying to sound reasonable and mature. "You're right to be upset with me. My behavior at the wedding was unacceptable and unjustifiable. I'm glad to hear you've had time to reflect," I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. "I spoke with my dad about all this," she continued, and I could tell she was following some kind of prepared script. "He made me see that I've been directing my frustration at the wrong person. You've always been there for me, funding my studies, my apartment, helping me when I needed it." "Oh, really? And what does Mark think about your behavior on Saturday?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "Dad says that maybe I've been influenced by his resentment towards you for too long," she admitted in a small voice. "He says it's time for me to form my own opinions about our mother-daughter relationship." Interesting. Mark was trying to do damage control, probably fearing that I might reveal some of the conversations Thomas had recorded where he advised Natalie on how to manipulate Andrew financially. "That seems very wise of your father," I commented dryly. "And what are your plans to demonstrate this newfound maturity and perspective?" "Well, I thought we could have lunch together tomorrow, just you and me, to talk like adults and so I can apologize properly for my behavior." "Tomorrow might be difficult," I lied deliberately. "I have several important commitments I can't cancel." "Please, Mom," she exclaimed, and all her carefully constructed composure instantly crumbled. "I need to talk to you. Things with Andrew are tense since what happened at the wedding." "Tense in what way?" I asked, with feigned motherly concern. He's acting strangely, distant. Last night, he barely spoke a word to me, and this morning he left for work without having breakfast with me, which he never does." Of course, he was acting strangely. He had just received devastating information about the woman he had married just 4 days ago. He was probably going through all the stages of emotional grief. "Maybe Andrew is also processing what happened at the wedding," I suggested with false compassion. "It must have been very uncomfortable for him to witness that exchange between us." "Exactly," Natalie exclaimed, clinging to that explanation like a life raft. "That's why I need to fix things with you. If he sees that you and I have resolved our differences, maybe things will go back to normal." "I understand your logic," I said slowly. "But, Natalie, some words can't be taken back. Some actions have permanent consequences." "But Mom, I'm your daughter," she cried desperately. "You have to forgive me." "Family is family." "Yes," I agreed in a soft voice, deliberately contrasting with her hysterical tone. "Family is family. And families support each other, respect each other, love each other unconditionally, don't you think?" "Yes, exactly. That's what I'm trying to tell you." "Then help me understand something, Natalie," I continued in the same calm tone. "If family is family, If mutual respect is so important, why did you choose to humiliate me publicly instead of talking to me privately about any resentment you might have?" The silence stretched for several seconds. I could hear her uneven breathing on the other end of the line. I don't know what came over me," she finally mumbled. "It was like all the pressure built up over years suddenly exploded." "Pressure built up over years?" I repeated. "Are you referring to the pressure of accepting my financial support while secretly despising me?" "No, that's not it," she protested, but her voice sounded less convincing than before. "Then explain it to me, Natalie. Explain how someone who respects and loves me as family can hold so much resentment for so long and then unleash it in the cruelest way possible at the most public moment possible." Another long silence. This time, when she spoke, her voice was broken and small. "I don't have a good explanation, Mom. I just know I was wrong and I would do anything to undo it." "I know, sweetie," I said with a genuine tenderness that surprised even me. "But some things can't be undone. You can only face the consequences and learn from them." "What does that mean for us?" she asked in a barely audible voice. "It means that tomorrow is going to be a very important day for you and for Andrew," I replied mysteriously. "And after tomorrow, we can talk about how to rebuild our relationship on completely honest foundations." I hung up the phone, knowing that in less than 24 hours, Natalie's carefully constructed world would completely fall apart. Wednesday, September 14, began with a deceptive calm that reminded me of those moments of absolute silence that precede the most devastating earthquakes. As I had my morning coffee on the terrace, watching the first rays of sun illuminate the rooftops of Chicago, I knew that somewhere in the city, Andrew Moore was reviewing for the third or fourth time the complete dossier he had received from Thomas the previous afternoon. At 8:30 in the morning, my phone vibrated with a text message from Thomas. "Target has confirmed receipt of the material. Emotional response visible even through email. Requests urgent meeting to clarify additional details." I smiled as I reread the message. Thomas's professional precision had always impressed me, but in this particular case, his ability to maintain emotional distance while handling such explosive information was exactly what I needed. I replied immediately. "Authorize the meeting. Neutral location. Central Cafe, Downtown Square, 10:30 a.m. Maintain partial anonymity until you assess his emotional state." As I got dressed to go out, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of anticipation and melancholy. On one hand, I was about to witness the final collapse of the web of lies my daughter had built over the years. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore that an innocent young man was about to see his dreams of marital happiness destroyed because of the person he trusted most. At 10 o'clock, I strategically positioned myself in a coffee shop across from Central Cafe, from where I could clearly observe the meeting between Thomas and Andrew without being seen. I ordered an espresso and a croissant, although I knew I probably wouldn't touch either. Andrew arrived 5 minutes late, and his appearance immediately struck me. The confident, elegant young entrepreneur I had known for years had transformed into someone unrecognizable. His usually impeccable suit was wrinkled, as if he had slept in it. His eyes were red and swollen, evidence of a night of insomnia and tears. His hair, normally styled with gel, was messy and unkempt. Thomas was already sitting at a discreet table in the back when Andrew entered the cafe. I could see the investigator partially stand up to greet him, pointing to the empty chair in front of him. Andrew sat down with mechanical movements, like an automaton. Although I couldn't hear the conversation from my position, the body language of both men told me the whole story I needed to know. Thomas spoke with measured gestures and a serious expression, occasionally pointing to a manila folder he had placed on the table. Andrew nodded compulsively, his hands visibly trembling, as he skimmed through documents he clearly recognized as authentic. At one point, I saw Andrew put both hands on his head, holding it as if to keep it from exploding. His shoulders were shaking in a way that left no doubt he was silently crying. Thomas leaned forward, speaking to him in what seemed to be a comforting but firm tone. The meeting lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it ended, Andrew shook Thomas's hand with an expression that mixed desperate gratitude with deep pain. He left the cafe walking like a man who had just received a terminal diagnosis. 20 minutes later, Thomas met me at my observation post. "How did it go?" I asked without preamble, although his expression had already given me the basic answer. "Devastated but grateful," Thomas replied, sitting down across from me. At first, he tried to deny the evidence, looking for alternative explanations for every photograph, every record, every recording. But when I showed him the audio recording from September 5th, he completely broke down. The recording where she talks about marriage as a long-term investment? Exactly that one. He immediately recognized Natalie's voice, and when he heard the part about Marcus being her real passion, he started crying uncontrollably. Thomas recounted with a grave expression. He told me that over the last few months he had noticed changes in her behavior, but he had attributed them to the stress of organizing the wedding. What kind of changes? Physical coldness, lack of interest in conversations about the future of the company, unexplained expenses that she justified as personal investments. He also confessed that for the honeymoon they had planned, she had insisted on having separate rooms to keep the romance alive. That information surprised me. Even I, with all my mistrust of Natalie's motivations, hadn't imagined she would go that far in her calculated coldness. "Did you give him any advice on how to proceed?" I asked. I recommended that he consult with a lawyer specializing in divorces before confronting Natalie, especially since she is listed as a co-owner of the company and could try to claim half the assets in case of a separation, Thomas explained. I also suggested that he discreetly gather all important financial documents before she realizes he knows the truth. Did he mention anything about talking to me? Yes. He asked me insistently about my identity and how I had obtained all that information. I told him I have reliable sources who prefer to remain anonymous, but that all the material was collected for his protection, not for revenge against her. Did he believe it? Partially. He's a smart man, Rebecca. He suspects that someone close to the family is involved, but right now he's too emotionally shattered to investigate that connection. At 12 noon, while I was having lunch at home, I received the first hysterical call from Natalie. "Mom! Andrew is acting completely strange," she cried without even saying hello. This morning he left the house without telling me where he was going, and when I tried to call him, he sent me straight to voicemail. "Maybe he has important work to attend to," I suggested with false tranquility. The first few days after a wedding can be stressful for young entrepreneurs. "No, this is different," she insisted, her voice bordering on hysteria. "Last night he didn't touch me once. We were in the same bed, and it was like I was invisible. Natalie, maybe you should talk directly with your husband about these concerns," I advised her in a motherly tone. Honest communication is the foundation of any successful marriage. "I've tried to talk to him, but every time I ask him what's wrong, he looks at me in a way that scares me," she confessed, and I could tell her panic was completely genuine. Panic? Fear? What kind? I asked with morbid curiosity. Like he's discovered something terrible about me, and he's waiting for the right moment to confront me, she murmured in a trembling voice. "And is there something terrible that he could have discovered?" I asked with studied innocence. The silence that followed my question lasted for almost 30 seconds. It was a silence filled with guilt, fear, and the horrifying realization that her worst nightmares might be coming true. "Mom, why are you asking me that?" she finally responded in a small, frightened voice. "Because if you're worried that your husband has discovered something terrible, that suggests there is something to discover," I replied with relentless logic. "I haven't done anything wrong," she exclaimed, but her protest sounded desperate and unconvincing even to herself. "Then you have nothing to worry about," I concluded with a calm that I knew would drive her mad. Honest marriages survive any misunderstanding. "Mom, I need your help," she pleaded, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "If Andrew is thinking of doing something drastic, I need your support. I need you to talk to him and explain that our family is not what it seems." "And what exactly should I explain to him?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "That I love you, that what I said at the wedding was a result of stress, that we are a normal family with normal problems." "Natalie," I said with a soft but firm voice, "I cannot lie to your husband about the nature of our relationship. It would be deeply dishonest to him, and he deserves the complete truth about the woman he has married." "What do you mean, the complete truth?" she asked in a barely audible voice. "I mean that if Andrew has questions about your character, your honesty, or your ability to be a faithful and committed wife, I am not going to lie to protect you from the consequences of your own decisions." The gasp of horror that escaped her throat confirmed that she had understood the message perfectly. "Mom, please," she whispered. "I'm your daughter." "Yes," I agreed. "You are my daughter. And that is precisely why I will not allow you to continue living a life built on lies and manipulation. It's time for you to face the truth about yourself, Natalie. And it's time for Andrew to know that truth as well. He's going to ask for a divorce, she cried desperately. That, I replied with a coldness that surprised even me, will be his decision, and whatever his decision is, it will be the right one for him. I hung up the phone and turned it off immediately, knowing that the next few hours would be crucial, and I couldn't let Natalie's desperate pleas make me waver in my resolve. The dominoes had started to fall, and there was no way to stop the chain of events that I myself had set in motion. Thursday, the 15th of September 2023, will be a date I will remember forever, not only for being the day the truth finally emerged from the shadows, but for being the moment I witnessed a life built on foundations of deceit collapse with the force of a demolished building. At 7 inches the morning, my phone rang with the insistence of a fire alarm. It was Helen, my sister, who rarely called me so early unless it was something urgent. "Rebecca, what the hell is going on?" she asked without preamble, her voice laden with worry and confusion. "Mark just called me hysterical, saying Natalie is having a nervous breakdown and that you have something to do with it." "Good morning, Helen," I replied with deliberate calm as I poured my first coffee of the day. "What exactly did Mark tell you?" "He says Andrew came home last night with a folder full of photographs and documents, that he confronted Natalie with accusations of infidelity and that she's completely devastated," Helen related quickly. "He also says you've cut off all the financial support you were giving her and that they suspect you're behind this whole situation. And what do you think about all this?" I asked, genuinely curious to know my sister's perspective. Helen was silent for several seconds before answering. "Rebecca, I've known my niece since she was born. I also know the kind of father Mark has been all these years. And above all, I know you. If you've reached the point of completely cutting off contact with Natalie, it's because you've discovered something really serious." Her intuition had always been sharp, and once again, she had hit the nail on the head with surgical precision. "Helen, over the next few days, many different versions of this story will be circulating," I explained carefully. "I ask you to keep an open mind and to judge the facts when you have all the available information." "Do the facts include that Natalie has indeed been cheating on her husband?" she asked directly. "The facts will speak for themselves," I replied, avoiding specific details. "But I assure you that everything that is happening is a direct consequence of decisions Natalie made freely over months, if not years." At 9 in the morning, Thomas called me with a report on the nighttime confrontation between Andrew and Natalie. "Rebecca, Andrew contacted me last night after speaking with his wife," Thomas began in a professional but understanding tone. "He has authorized me to share the details of what happened with you, considering he strongly suspects your involvement in all of this. How did the confrontation unfold?" I asked, mentally preparing myself to hear details I knew would be devastating. "Andrew got home at 6 in the evening with all the documentation we had provided. He found Natalie preparing dinner, acting completely normal. He asked her to sit in the living room because he needed to talk to her about something important," Thomas narrated with cinematic detail. "How did she react initially?" "At first, she tried to maintain her composure. When he showed her the first photographs of her entering Marcus's building, she claimed they were normal personal training sessions, but when he played the audio recording from September 5th, her facade completely crumbled. I could vividly imagine the scene. Natalie hearing her own voice, describing her marriage as a long-term investment, and confessing her real passion for Marcus. The horror and shame she must have felt upon realizing that her most intimate and treacherous words had been captured and documented. What arguments did she use to defend herself? I continued asking. Initially, complete denial. Then she claimed the recording was taken out of context, that it was a hypothetical conversation, that she never had serious intentions of cheating on him, Thomas detailed. But when Andrew showed her the financial records of the romantic dinners paid for with company money, the gifts bought for Marcus, the hotel reservations, and the photographs of Marcus, all her defensive strategy disintegrated. And then she changed tactics completely. She started crying hysterically, saying she had made a terrible mistake, that she was confused by the stress of the wedding, that Marcus meant nothing to her, the investigator continued. She begged him for forgiveness, promised to cut off all contact with the trainer, and even offered to give up her share of the company as a gesture of good faith. How did Andrew respond to these pleas? With a coldness that surprised me coming from someone so young, Thomas admitted. He told her that the problem wasn't just the physical infidelity, but the calculated and deceitful nature of her entire behavior. He specifically mentioned the recorded conversation where she talked about marriage as a financial transaction. That response filled me with a strange mix of pride and sadness. Pride because Andrew had shown more moral strength than I had expected. Sadness because a 5-year-old young man had been forced to mature brutally in a single night. What was his final decision? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He told her the marriage was over, that he couldn't continue living with someone he had completely lost trust in. He gave her 24 hours to leave the house they shared and informed her that he would immediately begin divorce proceedings. How did the conversation end? Natalie had a full-blown panic attack, hyperventilation, uncontrollable crying, threats of self-harm. Andrew had to call Mark to come and take care of her. He left the house and slept in a hotel, Thomas concluded. At 11 inches the morning, my phone started ringing insistently. It was Natalie, using Mark's phone because I had blocked her number after our conversations in the previous days. "Mom, please pick up." She screamed immediately, her voice shattered by hours of crying. "It's all over. Andrew is going to leave me. He says he's going to file for divorce." "Natalie, take a deep breath," I said with a calm that contrasted dramatically with her hysteria. "Tell me exactly what happened. He knows everything," she sobbed uncontrollably. "He has photographs, recordings, documents. He knows about Marcus. He knows about the dinners. He knows everything about the company money." "And is what he knows true?" I asked with deliberate softness. "That doesn't matter now," she cried desperately. "What matters is that my marriage is destroyed, that I'm going to lose everything, the house, the company, my reputation." "Natalie, it's very interesting that your first concern is material losses," I observed with clinical coldness. "You're not worried about the pain you've caused a man who loved you." "Of course I'm worried about Andrew," she protested, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But Mom, I need your help. I need you to talk to him. I need you to explain to him that I can change." "Change what, exactly?" I asked. "Everything. My behavior, my attitudes, my mistakes," she stammered. "I can completely cut off contact with Marcus. I can give up my share of the company. I can do couples therapy. Whatever it takes." "Natalie, do you really think Andrew can ever trust someone who has proven capable of maintaining a double life for months?" I asked her with brutal honesty. "But people can change," she insisted desperately. "I can prove to him that I'm different, that I can be the wife he needs. The wife he needs, or the wife you need to be to maintain your lifestyle?" I countered. The silence that followed my question was revealing. Even in the midst of her emotional crisis, Natalie realized she had revealed too much about her true motivations. "Mom, please," she finally murmured in a broken voice. "I'm your daughter. You can't just not help me in the most difficult moment of my life." "Natalie, I have been helping you for 28 years, I replied with genuine sadness. "I have given you money, support, unconditional love, second chances, third chances. But I cannot help you escape the consequences of your own decisions when those decisions have deeply hurt innocent people." "But I'm going to lose everything," she cried hysterically. "Yes," I agreed simply and directly. "You are going to lose everything you have built on lies. And that loss will be your opportunity to discover who you really are when you don't have the financial security of others supporting you. What am I going to do? Where am I going to live? How am I going to support myself?" she asked in authentic panic. "You're going to do what millions of adults do every day," I replied. "You're going to find a job, you're going to rent an apartment you can afford, you're going to pay your own bills, and you're going to learn to live with the consequences of your decisions." "I can't do it alone," she sobbed. "Then it's time you learned," I concluded. "Because Natalie, for the first time in your adult life, you are going to be truly alone. Without my money, without Andrew's money, without your father's manipulation, just you facing the reality of what you have created." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a whole hour, processing the mix of emotions churning in my chest. Satisfaction at seeing justice finally served, sadness for the young man who had lost his romantic illusions, and a deep melancholy for the daughter I had lost forever, not because of me, but because of her. That afternoon, Andrew called me directly for the first time since this whole situation began. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his voice mature in a way it hadn't been a week before. "I think it's time we talked." The conversation with Andrew that Thursday afternoon was one of the most difficult of my life. not because of conflict or confrontation, but because of the depth of pain I could hear in the voice of that young man who, until a week ago, had been my son-in-law and had represented for me the hope that my daughter could find genuine happiness. Mrs. Smith, I need you to know that I hold no grudge against you, Andrew began in a controlled voice, thick with emotion. I understand that you acted to protect me from a situation that could have continued for years without me knowing. Andrew, first of all, I want to apologize to you, I replied with absolute sincerity, not for revealing the truth, but for not warning you before you walked down the aisle. I knew what Natalie was doing, and I should have found a way to inform you before you married her. Why didn't you? He asked, not with reproach, but with genuine curiosity. Because I needed to be completely sure of my suspicions, because I needed irrefutable evidence that couldn't be denied or misinterpreted, and because, if I'm honest with myself, I wanted Natalie to go so far in her deceit that she couldn't justify her actions as minor or momentary mistakes, I admitted, the honesty costing me to speak. I understand your position, he replied after several seconds of reflection. Although I must admit, part of me would have preferred to know the truth before saying my wedding vows. What are you going to do now? I asked, shifting the topic to more practical matters. I've already contacted my lawyer, David Miller. I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow on grounds of proven adultery. I have all the necessary documentation thanks to the investigation you commissioned, Andrew explained with a determination that impressed me. I'm also going to start the legal process to recover the company share I granted to Natalie. Is that going to be legally complicated? David says no, considering we have documentary proof that she used company funds to finance her extramarital relationship. That constitutes misappropriation of marital assets, he detailed, with a legal knowledge he had rapidly acquired in the last 24 hours. And what are your long-term plans? I'm leaving the country, Mrs. Smith, he announced with a firmness that allowed no argument. I have business offers in Chile that I've been considering for months. It's the perfect time to expand the company internationally and leave all of this behind. His decision filled me with an unexpected sadness. Andrew had been, for years, like the son I never had. His departure represented not only the end of the marriage to my daughter, but also the loss of a relationship I had deeply valued. When do you plan to leave? I asked. As soon as the legal aspects of the divorce are settled. David estimates that with all the available evidence, we could have a resolution in less than 3 months, he calculated. By January 2024, I hope to be settled in Santiago. Andrew, I want you to know that I will always consider you part of my family, regardless of what has happened with Natalie, I told him, with genuine emotion. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. That means a lot to me, he replied, and I could tell he was holding back tears. You've been more of a mother to me these years than my own father was before he passed away. After that conversation, I was left to reflect on the ruins left after the explosion. A destroyed marriage, a young entrepreneur forced into exile from his country, a fragmented family, and at the center of it all, my daughter facing the most devastating consequences of her life. Over the next 6 months, from October 2023 to March 2024, I watched from a distance as the complete collapse of the life Natalie had built unfolded. Mark periodically informed me of her condition, not out of genuine concern for my emotional well-being, but because he needed me to understand the magnitude of the crisis to manipulate me towards a reconciliation. Rebecca, your daughter has been living on my sofa for 2 months, Mark told me during one of our more tense phone calls. She can't find a job because she's in psychological treatment for severe depression and panic attacks. The medication has her in a state where she can barely function day to day. Is she receiving adequate professional help? I asked, because despite everything, my motherly instinct hadn't completely disappeared. Yes, she's seeing Dr. Linda Vega at the University Hospital, twice-a-week sessions, but the doctors say it's going to be a long process, Mark explained, with a tone that wavered between genuine concern and calculated manipulation. Has she tried to find a job? She's been to several interviews, but when employers ask her about the gap in her resume after her failed marriage, she breaks down emotionally. Besides, the divorce scandal has spread through professional circles in Chicago. Her reputation is destroyed, Mark detailed cruelly. In February 2024, 5 months after the initial collapse, I received information that Andrew had finalized all legal proceedings and had permanently moved to Chile. He had fully recovered his company share, sold his properties in the States, and cut all ties with his previous life. It was then, in March 2024, that I made the decision I had been considering for 7 months. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and betrayal, despite the public humiliation I had suffered, Natalie was still my daughter. And as a mother, I had a responsibility to offer her a chance for genuine redemption. I called her directly on her cell phone on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice when she answered was unrecognizable, dull, without energy, like someone who had completely lost hope. "Natalie, it's Mom," I said simply. The silence that followed lasted for almost a full minute. I could hear her uneven breathing. I could imagine her processing the shock of receiving my call after 6 months of total silence. "Mom," she finally murmured, and that single word contained years of pain, regret, and desperation. "I want you to come to my house on Saturday afternoon. We need to talk," I said in a tone that allowed no negotiation. Are you going to give me another chance?" she asked in a voice so small and vulnerable, it reminded me of the 8-year-old girl she was before Mark began his work of manipulation. "I'm going to give you the opportunity to earn a second chance," I corrected her carefully. "But it will come with very specific and non-negotiable conditions, and if you fail on any of those conditions, it will be the last conversation we ever have in our lives." "I accept any condition," she replied immediately, without even asking what they would be. "Saturday at 4 in the afternoon. Come alone. Without Mark, without lawyers, without intermediaries. Just you and me talking like adults about how you can rebuild your life from scratch," I explained. "I'll be there, Mom, I promise," she said with a determination I hadn't heard in her voice for years. After hanging up, I sat on my terrace watching the Chicago sunset and reflecting on the conversation we would have in a few days. It wouldn't be an easy or emotional reconciliation. It would be a rigorous contract between a mother who had learned to set boundaries and a daughter who needed to learn the most basic lessons about responsibility, honesty, and personal dignity. The conditions I would impose would be severe but fair. Continued psychological treatment, stable and honest employment, complete financial independence, and a sustained demonstration over a full year that she could live as a person of integrity and responsibility. I knew it would be the hardest year of Natalie's life, but I also knew it might be her only real chance to become the woman she always had the potential to be, before lies and manipulation completely corrupted her character. Saturday would determine whether my daughter was truly willing to do the work necessary to deserve a second chance, or if she had forever lost the ability to genuinely change. Saturday, the 16th of March 2024, arrived with that golden light characteristic of a Chicago spring that had witnessed so many decisive moments in my life. As I prepared coffee for two for the first time in 6 months, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of nervousness and determination. This conversation would define not only the future of my relationship with Natalie, but also whether she truly had the capacity to transform into a different person. At 4 o'clock exactly, I heard the doorbell of my apartment. When I opened the door, I struggled to recognize the woman in front of me. Natalie had lost at least 20 pounds. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, without any styling products. She was wearing worn-out jeans and a basic white shirt that she had probably bought at a thrift store. But the most shocking thing was her face. All the arrogance and petulance that had characterized her personality for years were gone, replaced by a genuine humility I had never seen in her. "Hi, Mom," she said in a soft voice, keeping her gaze down like a child who knows she has done something terribly wrong. "Natalie, come in and sit in the living room," I replied in a neutral tone, pointing to the sofa where we had had so many superficial conversations over the years. She sat on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped on her knees, waiting for me to take the lead. Her body posture clearly communicated that she understood the gravity of the situation and had no intention of trying to manipulate or control the conversation. "Before we begin, I want you to understand something fundamental," I started, sitting in my favorite armchair across from her. "This is not a conversation between a mother who automatically forgives her daughter. This is a conversation between two adults, where one of them must prove they deserve a second chance after completely betraying the other's trust." "I understand, Mom," she murmured without looking up. "Do you really understand, Natalie? Because for 28 years, you've lived with the certainty that no matter what you did, there would always be someone to rescue you from the consequences. Your father when you were a child, me when you were a teenager and young adult, Andrew when you got married. That safety net no longer exists," I explained with a clarity that allowed no misunderstanding. "I know," she replied, and for the first time, she raised her gaze to meet mine. These last 6 months have been the hardest of my life, but also the most educational. I've had to face who I really am when I don't have anyone else's money supporting me. Tell me exactly how you've been living, I requested, needing to know the concrete details of her experience. Since January, I've been working at a shoe store called Miranda's Footwear on State Street. She began her account with a surprising honesty. 8 hours a day, Monday to Saturday, selling shoes to tourists and locals for $900 a month. It's exhausting. My feet constantly ache, and some customers treat me like I'm invisible. And where do you live? I rent a room in a shared apartment in the Triana neighborhood for $300 a month. I share a kitchen and bathroom with 2 college students who are half my age, she continued without drama, simply stating the facts. I cook my own meals. I do my own laundry. I pay my own bills for the first time in my adult life. How do you feel living like this? At first, it was horrible, she admitted with an honesty that moved me despite my emotional defenses. I cried every night for the first few weeks. I felt humiliated, furious, like the world had treated me unfairly. But Dr. Vega helped me understand that those feelings came from a mentality of privilege I had never questioned. Are you still in therapy? Yes, 2 sessions a week with Dr. Linda Vega at the University Hospital. I pay for the sessions with my own money, $120 each, which means a significant part of my salary goes to treatment, she explained, with a mathematical precision that showed she had learned to manage a real budget. But it's necessary. I've had to unlearn patterns of behavior I had developed over decades. What kind of patterns? Emotional manipulation, compulsive lying, the feeling that I deserve things without working for them, the inability to accept responsibility for my actions, she listed with a self-awareness she had never shown before. I've also had to face the fact that I treated Andrew like an object, not a person with feelings and rights of his own. Her mention of Andrew made me feel a renewed pang of pain. Have you had any contact with him since he left for Chile? No, and I shouldn't, she responded immediately. Doctor. Vega explained to me that any attempt to contact him would be a way of continuing my manipulative patterns. He deserves to build a new life without interference from the person who betrayed him so deeply. And what about Marcus? I cut all contact with him immediately after Andrew confronted me, she said in a firm voice. I changed my exercise routine. I avoid places where I might run into him. I deleted his phone number. That relationship was a symptom of much deeper problems in my character that I have to solve before I can have any kind of healthy romantic relationship. Natalie, I need to ask you a very direct question, I said, preparing for the most difficult part of our conversation. Do you truly understand the magnitude of the damage you caused, not just to Andrew, but to the entire family, or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? She was silent for several minutes, and I could see her mentally processing the question. When she finally answered, her voice trembled with genuine emotion. Mom, over these months, I've had time to review every decision I made over the last few years. I've understood that I not only betrayed Andrew, but I used you as a personal bank while secretly despising you. I've understood that humiliating you at my own wedding was the cruelest and most unforgivable act I could have committed, she began, tears streaming down her cheeks. Go on, I prompted, needing to hear everything. I've understood that I ruined the life of a good man who genuinely loved me, that I destroyed our family's reputation, that I wasted every opportunity you gave me to be a better person, she continued, speaking through sobs. And I've understood that nothing I can do now can undo that damage. I can only work to become someone different so that I never cause so much pain to the people I love again. And are you willing to do that work, regardless of whether I decide to forgive you or not? Yes, she responded without hesitation, because I've finally understood that becoming a better person isn't something I do to get forgiveness or benefits. It's something I have to do out of moral responsibility to the people I've hurt and to myself. Over the next hour, we established the specific conditions for her possible redemption. She would continue to work in honest jobs that she paid for with her own effort. She would maintain complete financial independence for a minimum of 1 year before accepting any financial help from me. She would continue with psychological therapy until both she and her doctor considered her personal transformation process complete. Most importantly, she would have to demonstrate with consistent actions over 12 months that she had developed genuine empathy, honesty, and personal responsibility. There would be no immediate emotional reconciliation. There would be no automatic forgiveness due to family ties. Natalie, I want you to understand that our relationship will never be what it was before, I explained at the end of our conversation. Too many things have happened. Too much trust has been lost. But if you prove over the next year that you have truly changed, we can build a different relationship, one based on mutual respect and complete honesty. I understand, Mom. And I accept those conditions, she replied with a determination that sounded authentic. Then I will call you once a month to check on your progress. No more, no less. The rest is completely up to you, I concluded. When she left that afternoon, I remained on my terrace, reflecting on the strange feeling of cautious hope I felt for the first time in almost a year. I had seen something in my daughter's eyes that hadn't been there for decades. Genuine humility and the determination of a person who had finally hit rock bottom and was willing to climb back up. Today, 8 months after that conversation, Natalie is still working at the shoe store, still living independently, still in therapy, and still meeting every one of the conditions we set. Our relationship is different, more formal, less emotional, but also more honest and respectful than it has ever been. I've learned that being a mother doesn't mean protecting your children from the consequences of their actions, but teaching them that all decisions have outcomes and that true love sometimes requires allowing the people we love to face life's toughest lessons. Natalie lost a marriage, a fortune, a reputation, and years of financial comfort, but she gained something she never had: the chance to discover who she could be when no one else was holding her up but herself. And I learned that sometimes the most perfect revenge is not the destruction of your adversary, but giving them the chance to become a better person than they ever were. If you liked this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.